Good morning, everyone. Today, if you're watching this on Sunday, is April 5th, which is Palm Sunday. And Palm Sunday is the day that Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey. And we celebrate this day. It's the week before Easter, and we call it the Holy Week. And so today, we want to dive into Matthew 26 a little bit with each other. So grab your Bibles, turn to Matthew 26, and get ready to go through the prayer path. So the prayer path is actually something created by our very own Kara Crab. Some of you call her Mama Crab. And it's a very, very, very great symbol of the week leading up to Jesus' death and resurrection. So today, we're going to go through the prayer path and highlight a few things from Matthew 26. And I hope that you come along for the journey and that you're excited to get into this a little bit more. As this is a new experience, this is something that we're experimenting with today, of doing this outside to take you through the prayer path, which is on our grounds at ZPC. So I hope you enjoy it. Let's go. When it was evening, Jesus sat down at the table with the 12 disciples. While they were eating, he said, "I tell you the truth, one of you will betray me." Greatly distressed, each one asked in turn, "Am I the one, Lord?" He replied, "One of you who has just eaten from this bowl with me will betray me. For the Son of Man must die, as the Scriptures declared long ago. But how terrible it will be for the one who betrays him. It would be far better for that man if he had never been born." Judas, the one who would betray him, also asked, "Rabbi, am I the one?" And Jesus told him, "You have said it." As they were eating, Jesus took some bread and blessed it. Then he broke it in pieces and gave it to the disciples, saying, "Take this and eat it, for this is my body." And he took a cup of wine and gave thanks to God for it. He gave it to them and said, "Each of you drink from it, for this is my blood, which confirms the covenant between God and his people. It is poured out as a sacrifice to forgive the sins of many. Mark my words, I will not drink wine again until the day I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." Then they sang a hymn and went out to the Mount of Olives. Here at Station 3, which is the Last Supper station. Usually there's a table behind me, but a tree fell and it broke the whole table. But it's still a great representation of the Last Supper in this prayer path. And I wish that I had more time, but I know I only have a little bit of attention span from you guys today. So we want to highlight a few things from Matthew 26, and the first is, you guessed it, the Last Supper. This is where Jesus broke bread with his loved ones. And amidst these loved ones was one, Judas, that would betray him. Today, as a church, we're taking communion together. Even though we are spread out, we are still one church, and we're taking communion, and we hope that you are taking communion with your families. And we get a glance of First Communion here in Matthew 26. And this is where Jesus told his disciples that he was going to go to the cross to die, and that they would be able to remember this sacrifice by breaking of the bread and pouring of the wine or grape juice. This is to remember Jesus and what he has done for us. And at that time, the disciples didn't really truly understand what was going on or what was going to happen. But Jesus was giving them an example, was showing them what they would do after he was to ascend into heaven. And what we also remember is that you were and are worth it. We're at Station 4 now, and this is the Garden of Gethsemane. After the Last Supper, Jesus takes the disciples to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray. We constantly see Jesus praying. This time he was praying to the Father for any other way than the suffering that he was going to endure. Now, this is sometimes tough to understand. Why would God allow this to happen? Wasn't there another way? Couldn't God have just made everything right with a snap? I believe that he could. But when you think of love, what do you think of? Do you think of someone doing everything for you because they can? Or do you think of how maybe your parents show their love to you by protecting you, thinking of you first, sacrificing time, energy, sometimes what they want, to be with you and to show you love? That is what's happening here. You were and are worth it. God shows his love by giving us a clear way to him through Jesus. So guys, there's a lot more that we could go through in this passage alone. So I encourage you to read this a couple of times and reflect on that passage. Write down some questions, write down some feelings that you have contributing to this passage. Don't be afraid to dive in and get dirty with this passage. It's okay. Now, Jesus had done nothing wrong, and yet the leading priests were looking for people to lie about what Jesus had done. The calmness that Jesus shows in this moment in front of the council is encouraging. Then the people who had arrested Jesus led him to the home of Caiaphas, the high priest, where the teachers of religious law and elders were gathered. Meanwhile, Peter followed him at a distance and came to the high priest's courtyard. He went in and sat with the guards and waited to see how it would all end. Inside, the leading priests and the entire high council were trying to find witnesses who would lie about Jesus so they could put him to death. But even though they found many who agreed to give false witness, they could not use anyone's testimony. Finally, 2 men came forward, who declared, "This man said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days." Then the high priest stood up and said to Jesus, "Well, aren't you going to answer these charges? What do you have to say for yourself?" But Jesus remained silent. Then the high priest said to him, "I demand in the name of the living God, tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." Jesus replied, "You have said it, and in the future you will see the Son of Man seated in the place of power at God's right hand, and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothing to show his horror and said, "Blasphemy! Why do you need other witnesses? You have all heard his blasphemy. What is your verdict?" "Guilty," they shouted. "He deserves to die." Then they began to spit in Jesus' face and beat him with their fists. And some slapped him, jeering, "Prophesy to us, you Messiah. Who hit you that time?" This is a tough passage to go through. It's not easy to hear this. This is even harder when you think about what Jesus had to be feeling in this moment. But what he was thinking about was how this was all worth it. He was thinking about being the way, the truth, and the life for you. He gives us this gift of freedom from sin, a true relationship with the one true God, and connection with people on this earth that is more than just physical. It's a spiritual connection. Today we celebrate the triumphant victory that started with Jesus entering Jerusalem on a donkey, while the people made a path with their garments and palm leaves. What they were celebrating was what they thought was their coming king. What they did not expect was for Jesus to come to die. But you were worth it, and you are worth it. See, what we take from Palm Sunday is the start to Holy Week, the remembrance of Jesus' journey to the cross, and that you were and are worth it. No matter where you are today, in your walk, you are worth it.